Hey, everybody, it's Besta. Thank you for listening. We're having a conversation today about courage with two wonderful friends. Dr. Mary White is here. Mary, how are you?
Doing so good. I think you're the epitome of courage, by the way, Tim.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Thank you so much. And also with us, Tiffany FitzPatrick. Tiffany, how are you?
Wonderful. Excited to see both of you again. I'm glad to be back here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
me too.
so we're happy to be here. So I think everybody maybe has heard you on other earlier podcasts, but in case not, Dr. White, can you just tell us about who you are?
Sure. My name is Mary White, and I retired after 36 years in the public school system as a teacher, assistant principal. In my last 10 years, I was director of curriculum and instruction, K-12. And then I retired, and ho hum, that didn't work for me. So I got another job, and I work for another company tangentially in education. So
That's wonderful. And Tiffany?
I'm Tiffany FitzPatrick. I'm a writer, a speaker, and a consulting strategist. I'm also a psychic medium, and I weave my skills as a gifted psychic medium into my work consulting, specializing in shadow work and helping others reach from where they are to where they're going, observing the obstacles and finding a way to overcome them so that they can reach their potential. And so I've studied everything from religion to spirituality, shadow work, psychology, philosophy, and kind of a Jane of all trades. And I love talking about things like courage and human nature with other individuals on panel discussions.
Well, we're really happy you're here. And I love that both of you have taken all of these talents in all these different ways and ways that you've excelled in your life and pulling them all together to do wonderful things in many different ways. So thank you for sharing that.
Tiffany, I'm so glad you spoke about courage in that way, really seriously, because I I think we confuse courage with bravery, and I'm just thinking that I'm just not a very brave person. So, like, wouldn't go
I
on the roller coaster or go to scary things or anything like that. So I didn't think of courage the way you said something about it. So just sharing first before we began, Tim.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And you know what? I used to think the same thing. I used to think I wasn't brave. And it was actually someone that I thought that was brave that pointed out to me that they thought I was brave. And it deconstructed my entire view of what bravery and courage was and allowed me to kind of redefine it for myself. And that's why I'm so excited to talk about that today.
Yeah, I could use some redefinition.
We will jump into it.
All right. Well, should we define the terms that way or should I read the quote? Which would be smarter?
Let's jump into the quote. Yeah.
Okay. So I found this wonderful quote by the poet Alice Mackenzie Swain. And the quote is: "Courage is not the towering oak that sees storms come and go. It is the fragile blossom that opens in the snow." And I thought this was really, really beautiful. I'll read it again. "Courage is not the towering oak that sees storms come and go. It is the fragile blossom that opens in the snow." Just in case you're interested in knowing, Alice Mackenzie Swain lived from 1911 to 1996. She was born in Scotland, had a really interesting upbringing where her parents were very educational minded. She spent her youth traveling around, seeing all the wonderful sights and cathedrals and historic things around Europe, and then moved to Pennsylvania, where her father worked in a seminary, that kind of thing. She didn't start writing poems until she was 36 years old. And by the time she
Wow.
died in her 80s, she had written over 8,000 poems. And I think this may well be her most famous one or certainly one of the most famous ones. So I thought, let's talk about courage and bravery, these things you've already have started defining. So, Mary, I was going to start with you. When you heard this wonderful little nugget from this wonderful poet, what was your first reaction?
Well, my first reaction, quite honestly, Tim, was it could be both. I mean, I think it's very context specific. That's why I'm very interested in hearing Tiffany's thoughts too, for sure, because I feel like she has like really invested and investigated in terms of herself. But I feel like sometimes you could be the tall, towering oak, and sometimes you could be the tiny blossom. I mean, I thought it was very context specific. And we just kind of started talking about this difference between courage and between bravery. And I really haven't investigated that too much. I mean, so that's just my initial thoughts, Tim.
Tiffany.
Honestly, the first thing that I thought when I read the quotes, which is such a beautiful quote, was I have so much to say on this topic. That was literally
Good,
the first thing
good.
that came to mind. So, yeah, when it comes, because you're right, it can be both, but we so often see the towering oak as strong and brave and
Yes.
courageous. And so just having that juxtaposed against the blossom opening up in winter, like amongst snow, seemingly out of season, having that juxtaposition, it really does help you to expand your definition. A lot of my work in shadow work honestly comes down to, like, I have a passion for etymology and I have a passion for just definitions. And so when
Me
we're
too.
Yes. And what, I mean, I always did, but I think what really even expanded that passion was giving myself permission to redefine words, because words, English vocabulary definitions are literally all made up. Like the rules are all made up. And we were just presented with a book. Don't get me wrong. I love the dictionary. I'm one of those nerds and I wear it proudly. Love the dictionary. And at the same time, it doesn't have to be the be all to end all when it comes to definitions. We get to define our own definitions for words. And I think that also applies to courage. And so seeing the difference between a blossom bravely opening up for just a minuscule amount of time out of season, where it could be trampled on, or it could die to the frost, and deciding to open up anyway, choosing to open up anyway. And of course, we fall into like the biology of, does it choose or does it just naturally happen? But when we're placing that poetically against humans and us choosing to be courageous to open up in a scary situation where we might be trampled on, we might be trolled, we might be rejected, we might be, hooked off the stage, so to speak. That's a whole different level of courage. And so that was, in a wild ramble rant, that was my first thoughts when I read that quote.
I just absolutely love that. P.S. Tim already knows this, but my favorite Christmas present was a dictionary when I was a young girl. But I love what you said that too about the tall, brave oak. Like I feel like just because it's bigger and has volume and takes up space and is massive and towering, that we feel like that is the picture of it. And I think that was my first initial thought, was that you could be both. And then my second thought was exactly that. Why does it always have to be towering? And please forgive me, it felt masculine to me, towering oak versus the blossom female. And that went into it too. And I was like, oh, this feels very masculine centered to me. But the quote is so beautiful that it's just about females. I'm not sure.
No, I think that's a brilliant point, because it does kind of bring in the hidden sexual gendered context to it,
Yes.
and to the word courage alone. Absolutely. Because we don't, it's very subtle, it's very hidden, it's very underground wavelengths, but we're really not shown courage next to feminine attributes. It's just not necessarily shown.
Except speaking etymologically, say that word for me, someone. Courage,
Etymologically, yeah.
don't you think it has something to do with heart? C-O-U-R, cur. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so that alone shows how definitions can change as it's translated into different languages and as it
yes.
progresses through the centuries. Absolutely, because what it once was defined as and described against versus how it's now presented, 20th, 21st century U.S., et cetera. That's a brilliant point. The genderification of just a word like courage. And this quote does an excellent job, and the poet obviously does an excellent job of breaking that open. And we have the opportunity to do the same thing. That was actually one of the strongest breakthroughs for me when it came to seeing courage and bravery differently. Was like I mentioned before, I didn't think of myself as brave or courageous until someone that I thought of as brave told me they thought I was brave. And it's completely blew me apart in the best way possible, because that individual is a very dear friend who is a police detective sergeant. And literally, like, from what I understood at that time of bravery and courageousness, like that was literally his entire existence at the time.
Right.
Yeah. And yet this was someone who I saw as incredibly brave, looking to me saying that I was brave. And, brave for the things I pursued, and brave for my willingness to travel alone, and brave for not coloring within the lines, etc. And it really allowed me to look at what we define to courage. And are we just looking at the bravery of public service, public safety, of stepping out into the front lines and being the go-between in a safety situation, etc.? But those same individuals, because for a very long time, I worked in public safety as a dispatcher. And one of the things that I noticed being in that environment for so long is that some of the individuals that are the most physically brave also seem to hold the most fear and cowardice when it comes to being brave with their emotions.
Emotionally brave. I was going to say that.
Yeah. And so I think that's a brilliant, because again, emotions are typically characterized femininely, whereas acts of bravery are characterized as masculine. And so again, we have this gendered clarification, and it's fascinating. It's helped me see people and my work with others in a completely different way.
Yeah, that's really brilliant. And I too have police officers in my family, two brothers and a nephew. And I I think you're right. Like, I always thought them as brave this way. And then are they not brave the other way? And I always think about too, like, this is not probably from the same word, but bravado,
Hmm.
maybe. Like, bravado to me sometimes feels false.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like you're putting on airs or putting on a brave face when you may not be, you know.
Right. Like a fake it till you make it kind of, yeah, like a cloak. You're putting on your bravado cloak. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. And certainly I've done that before, plenty of times.
Yeah. Honestly, in my life, it always kind of makes me chuckle a little bit, because in my life, I've had a lot of people tell me how confident they find me, which I laugh at that, because I think anyone who comes across as confident, there's probably a part of them that feels like, well, I don't feel confident all the time.
Right.
So really and for me, it was a matter of practice. Like, I practiced appearing and coming across as confidence. And I did that as a teenager, faking it till you make it. That was exactly what
Me
I did.
too.
And so there's a lot of courage in faking it till you make it in something like confidence or courageousness or bravado, until you feel it, or until it becomes a habit or a pattern of practice, where it's just like putting on any other jacket. It's still your jacket. It's not a false jacket, but maybe you had to work to practice it. And I think courage and bravery in a lot of ways are the same. Like, small acts of courage build up to bigger acts of courage, and it becomes
Sure.
easier to step into that.
Yeah, I love that. Tim, what are you thinking of all this? We've done all the talking.
I'm happy for you guys to do all the talking. I'm here wanting to facilitate this conversation, not necessarily have to be too big a part of it. But I do think that the point you're making is a really good one. And I think the point the poet is making is there are many, many ways of being courageous. And I think, as a matter of fact, on the surface, we don't tend to think of those. So her idea of pointing that out, I mean, I think I see acts of courage and bravery around me all the time, even if it's just, a young person stepping forward, or someone presenting themselves as their true authentic self when they know someone might not like it, or stepping up and saying something when you should speak up if someone says something that's not acceptable. Like, all of those things are courageous in all kinds of different ways. So I think her point to me is there are many, many ways to do this, and let's not forget the quiet ones, the less obvious ones.
Right. I mean, there's plenty of talk nowadays, Tim, about what bravery is and what it isn't in here in America, and what does it mean to be brave. Um, And there's a lot of also quietness happening too. There's blossoms all over, and there's small acts. And boy, those small acts of blossoms could be a gigantic wildflower field. I mean, so I love that notion.
Yeah, that's an excellent point about a wildflower field, because each of those acts, just like each one of those flowers, seeds an area around it, and so you can go from just having,
Exactly.
yeah, you just a few blossoms, or a bouquet of wildness, and having that seed flower field, but it can also seed others around you when they witness that act of bravery and that act of courage. When a couple of years ago, I up and moved from the Midwest to Washington by myself. I didn't really know anyone. I didn't have anything settled out here. I didn't have a residence set up or anything. I just yes, and that's what I kept being told, was how brave that was. And in that bravery, in that courage, I was terrified, and I knew I was terrified. I felt the fear, and I kept telling myself, yeah, I'm terrified. I'm also excited, but I'm not ignoring the fear. I'm doing it scared, and
Right.
I'm letting my fear ride shotgun, because it doesn't have to be stuffed in the trunk as if it doesn't exist, but our fear can like ride shotgun and be like, hey, maybe admire the speed limit sign. Maybe, hey, there's an exit here if you want to get off for a pit stop. Hey, you're feeling a little fatigued, like, because fear is there to protect us and keep us safe. But
That's
at the
right.
same time, we don't want to like stay stuck and stagnant in our comfort zone, because that's not growth. So I've noticed a lot of times people want to like push away fear, or they don't want to do anything unless the fear is dissolved. And so I hope that this conversation helps others feel encouraged to do it scared, and just a little at a time, pushing out of our comfort zone just a little at a time makes it easier to make those longer strides in the future.
I love that. And I just love that idea of putting your fear, like you said, in the seat next to you. That's such a good visual, but it's also a good metaphor. Like, okay, come along, we're pals.
Hmm.
We're pals, but you're gonna
Yeah.
sit next to me, because Tim and I have had this conversation before. I'm a scaredy cat, about a lot of things. Like, just I don't like scary things. Like I just don't like them.
Well,
So
but part of that is also just knowing yourself and allowing yourself to, I like these things, I don't like these things, I don't have to do these things over here. I think that's fine. One of my favorite quotes to what you guys are speaking of is feel the fear and do it anyway.
Hmm.
This was a real
right,
revelation for me many, many years ago when I was first trying to solve problems in my life. I was getting into therapy and really trying to figure things
right.
out. And this idea of, okay, you're not going to, the fear, as you're saying, the fear's not going to go away. You feel the fear, but you do it anyway. You push forward. That is courage.
Yes, it is.
Yes,
Yeah,
takes
and from
more.
a shadow, excuse me, from a shadow work perspective, our fear is a shadow that it feels like it's trying to stop us and restrict us and restrain us, but really it's just trying to protect us. And so once we see that, like, it's not an enemy in our face, it's a friend that's like literally trying to stop us from jumping into fire. So when we look at fear and we're like, okay, I'm terrified. What is this terror? What is this fear trying to tell me? So, like, listen to it. What can you do about the messages trying to provide you? And then correct it. Just like any friend, of like, hey, yes, I'm walking towards the fire because it's warm and it's pretty, but I'm not going to jump in the fire. It's cool. Why don't you take a seat? So
Hmm.
it's developing this relationship with fear, with the other parts of your shadow, and like, even just facing your fear, even just sitting with, what am I afraid of and why am I afraid of it? What is it trying to teach me? And how can I work with my fear to maybe plan a path forward that makes more sense for me and in general? That alone, that whole process, choosing to like sit with that introspection, is courage on its own.
Great. That's great. I mean, I think we're not. I think sometimes I'm confusing the word fear with um. How can I say this? Like, so you're claustrophobic or something like that. That's different than really the fear you're talking about, right? I mean,
I think even I think the fear can be applied to even claustrophobia. And of course, I'm not saying, hey, sit in a closet until you figure this out. Please
Right.
don't do that. That can be really unhealthy without, proper professional assistance. But what I am saying is that if you know that you're claustrophobic, we'll go with that example. Sit on the couch in a wide open space, plenty of light, and just think within yourself, why am I claustrophobic? Why am I afraid of small spaces? What is that trying to protect me? What is that trying to tell me? What is that
Right.
trying to signal to me? Where did this come from? And just have a conversation, ask questions with yourself. And it's important to know that, like, when we first start having that conversation with ourselves, the answers may not come right away. It may take a little bit of time. When it comes to shadow work, I like to think of it as having a conversation with someone. I mean, it's you, but imagine it's all those negative thoughts that you have spent so much time ignoring or shoving in a closet to not talk to, um, even belittling. Like, think of how often we have like negatively spoke to ourselves because we were trying to act right. And so having a conversation with yourself is really a matter of you're essentially trying to rebuild a relationship with someone that you've kind of verbally abused and neglected and abandoned for so long. So it may take a little bit of time to just sit with, be like, hey, I know that wasn't the best way to handle that. I know that now. I'm forgiving myself for that now. So let's just sit and have a conversation. And when you're ready to tell me what you've been trying to tell me, I'm here to listen.
Right. It's very interesting, or like just really interesting.
I would like to share that many years ago, another one of these big revelations I had was when someone explained to me that the feeling in your body for fear and excitement was almost exactly the same thing. This was
Right.
like giant, giant revelation for me because I had spent a lot of time feeling these things in my body and thinking, I'm always afraid.
Yeah.
And then when someone explained this to me, and I was like, oh, and I realized, oh, a lot of these things I'm feeling are not fear, they're excitement, and it feels almost identical in my body. Then I started to identify, now, wait a minute, is this fear or is this excitement? And this was hugely important for me because I stopped thinking of myself as someone who was afraid all the
Exactly.
time. And I realized, oh, I've just been misinterpreting this because I started out feeling a lot of fear at one point, right? So that's an example of sort of how you can learn to know better. And then I realized that sometimes that excitement was also me being courageous and taking that fear with the excitement and really pushing my boundaries. And that got to be thrilling to realize that I could do that, as you're sort of saying, bring the fear alongside with my excitement and then push those boundaries. And suddenly my life started to expand and grow and get so much better.
Yeah,
That's beautiful. I'm so glad
it
that you
is.
shared
Right.
that. Yeah, because you're exactly right. That's taking that fear with you and letting it expand. And I also want to point out, like, the amount of self-respect and self-esteem that we're enriched with when we accomplish those little challenges is so nourishing for a wildflower field as well.
I love this whole vision of the flower field. I think
Yeah,
I'm
and then
going
you
to take,
realize, yeah, exactly. And you realize, oh wow, like I can blossom in the snow and be, and like I could survive that. And it starts to open up your realization of what's possible for yourself. And then, of course, we're identifying all the different ways that there are to be courageous. And I think that's the other thing that I hope this conversation might bring some people to think about is there are people being courageous around us all the time, but our culture maybe doesn't tend to define it that way. And I think it's good for us to recognize it. And maybe,
absolutely.
to your point, Tiffany, maybe point it out to them. Thank you for being courageous when you did that thing,
Right.
because they might not even be framing it that way to themselves.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how often like I said, that was one thing that kind of broke it open for me, was someone that I thought was brave pointed out that they thought I was brave. And it made me look at myself differently. It made me look at others differently. So yeah, when you have an opportunity, I mean, sharing that kind of love with the world helps everyone in general. And it's free. It's free to hand out compliments of, your act today is courageous and it fills me with joy. Thank you for sharing that with the world. And I think talking about earlier, we were talking about like the other conversations that happen alongside this conversation of gender and courageousness. And at the same time, I think this quote opens up a conversation about strength and vulnerability and the strength of vulnerability.
Yes.
And, what so many people would think of as weakness now has the opportunity to be redefined as strength and courage when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and authentic. And I think that that's a whole additional conversation adjacent to everything about courageousness and bravery.
Yeah, and that's all the work of Brene Brown. She's very popular. She talks about vulnerability all the time. How
Yeah. And I
courageous.
love that you said the word authenticity, because I think that's being so vulnerable to be your authentic self, to bring that forward. It's really interesting. I did 15 years of podcast conversations, and it was really interesting. The last few years, instructors kept talking about the word authentic. I think it became sort
Mhm.
of recognized and understood through Brene Brown and many others, right? But the idea that I'm going to be real and authentic in front of my students, or whoever I'm standing in front of or talking to, right? And being able to say to them, I'm having a hard day,
Yeah.
so you guys, I'm going to do my best, but you need to know this is where I am. Like, there was a time when instructors or teachers never felt like they could ever be honest and authentic. Now, there's obviously boundaries and lines around all of that, but the idea that our culture is open to that. Now, obviously, there are many forces right now in our world that are trying to push that back into the box, because being authentic makes people very uncomfortable. They would much rather pretend to be this monolith, right? But we all know better. And so I want to encourage everybody, be your authentic self. That is courage, and it's
That
another part
is.
of the same conversation.
Yes, absolutely. So there was a study done, and I can't remember the name of it, but I'll try and locate it. But there was a study that I read recently where the study focused on trying to figure out the strength of different emotions, to focus on a particular emotion and look at the frequency and the vibration that came from that one emotion. They were trying to locate what the strongest was. And so the understanding is that love is the strongest emotion. So when we pour out love, the way that it extends from us and the strength of which it extends from us is miraculous. And what they found was that, yes, love is one of the strongest, but authenticity is either 40 or 400 times stronger than love itself. So
Wow.
the frequency that we release from ourselves, the vibration that we magnetize out from ourselves is 40 to 400. I can't remember if it's 40 or 400, but that's still a lot more than
Yeah.
just love itself. Love is already strong, but to stand in your authenticity is even stronger. And that is incredible. And this work is important to me because I like to think about, like, when it comes to the world being in difficulty, in a lot of ways, what are different things that we can do to kind of just help humanity in general? And one of the lesser known or lesser seen ways of helping the world at large is standing in love, sitting in love, being an anchor, an LED light on an LED board, if you will, of love, and holding that frequency. And if we can do that even more strongly by holding authenticity and
Yes.
allowing that to radiate from us like a ripple, to ripple through humanity to every other LED light that is holding love or authenticity, that literally can change and help elevate the vibration of Earth, and to help heal a lot of the lower vibrations that so many feel stuck in.
Interesting. And I love that when you say hold the love, like, tell me a little bit more.
Yeah. So if you think about any instance in which you feel so much love, just kind of like almost bursting your heart open. And when it just in that one moment, when we are feeling that and letting it spread throughout every cell in our body and then outside of ourselves, because our electromagnetic field that our heart generates extends at least 3 feet outside of us in each direction. And that is another study that has been shown. So
Wow.
that's not just woo, that's actual science that is catching up with woo, which I love. I love when science and magic come
Oh,
together.
woo. I'm
Yeah,
not a woo,
exactly.
by the way. You think I'm a woo, I'm not a woo, by the way.
No, I'm a woo. So that's what I love, is like is woo catching up, or science catching up with magic, is amazing, because I like to think of magic as science that we just haven't yet figured out. So when science can demonstrate that the electromagnetic field generated by the heart extends 3 feet from us, essentially our aura, our energetic body. So when we are just feeling that moment of love, whatever that moment is, whether we're watching crabs scuttle across the seafloor, or the sound of a child's laughter, or a blossom opening up out of season, whatever it is that triggers that moment of love, where our heart feels like it's almost bursting with joy and love, and letting that radiate through us and just continue. That's what I mean by holding or standing in that love, of letting that continue to expand. And then when we feel out of sync with that emotion, remembering that emotion taps us back into it. And continuing to do that allows us to meditate or stand in or sit in or hold that vibration, so that it causes a ripple effect outward to other individuals. Because science has also demonstrated how our energetic body, when it connects to other energetic bodies, that electromagnetic field, when it encounters others, it affects other individuals. And it's
Sure.
very similar to the metronome, of how you can set 100 different metronomes going at different rates, and they will eventually sync up to it. So be the metronome rather than syncing up with someone else's metronome, by setting the
Right.
emotion and the frequency that you want to be in.
I want to go back. I love this whole concept, and it's kind of contagious, if you will. Think too. You're talking woo, like strength finders, right? I mean, is that what you mean by woo, like the strength Thomas
No.
Rath strength finders?
Woo is like woo woo. So it's a moniker that's kind of been placed on anything spiritual or psychic or magical or witchy, or anything of that realm. That is not my moniker, but that is a moniker that typically has been placed of, oh, you're into tarot, that's woo woo. Oh, you're into meditating and yoga and vibrations, that's woo woo.
Okay.
I'm not saying that negatively. I'm saying that society in general, just like Tim, you were talking about how they want us in these models, these boxes that we've been conscripted to. And so when we break out of that to be authentic, then that kind of breaks down the power and the authority that others have established by forcing us into complacency and into these fixed boxes. And
And
it's the
keeping
same
us
way.
in our
So
place.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So woo woo is another, like, woo woo started out as being derogatory towards anyone that was like outside the box in a
Okay.
spiritual way. And so it's
We're,
one of those phrases that has been like reclaimed and transmuted into, well, if that's what you're going to call us, we're going to use that for our benefit. So
we're definitely talking about different woos. I'm talking about woo from Thomas Rath strength finders. It's a specific strength, and people
oh,
are woo, and you really should look into it, because it kind of has some connection. I don't want to say correlation. I want to say
yeah,
connection.
I will
It's
look into that.
Thomas Rath. I'm
Thomas
just gonna. I was checking. Yeah, I was checking to make sure that I had that correct, because I think it's Thomas Rath. Yeah, yeah. And you can take a strength finder test, and it's really very interesting. And you find out your top 5 strengths, and they're all strengths, by the way. But what are your top 5 strengths? We did it as a school district, and it's very interesting, because you're like, oh my gosh, that just nailed me, And I'm not a woo, so in that strength. Now I somehow can't find it, and I don't want to be looking. So in that, I was using woo in that context. That's why.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because how amazing would it be if it is associated, and if it's not, it now can be, thanks to this conversation, this panel discussion. Because, like I said, woo woo started as like a derogatory phrase for anyone involved in
Sure.
spiritual pursuits,
Who's out
and
there?
yeah, and then to like transition that and to the definition of woo as in a strength finder test of allowing yourself to be in your woo, your authentic, woo woo is now a woo strength. Like, how I
Right.
just
It's someone
love,
who can really woo people, someone who really gets people on their side. And it
yeah,
reminded me of when you were talking about that contagious love, like that really helps get people on your side. And I just thought it was, I thought it was interesting. Yeah.
I'm gonna look
I
into that.
really love strength finders. I didn't think I liked it. I thought it was a little bit like Oh, it's blah, blah, blah. No, I loved it. I loved it. I loved finding my top 5 strengths. I loved all that. I'm just sharing my top strength is intellection. It's just, and it's so true. I like to collect facts and collect words and all that stuff. So,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned your favorite gift was a dictionary. And I love that you mentioned that because I have always wanted an encyclopedia set, even though I know that like nowadays they're
so
obsolete
old
because of the internet
fashioned.
or whatever. But like I loved going to the library to just peruse through an encyclopedia. And yeah, so I love that. And I'm a sponge for random factoids and facts and information, and I'm a polymath, so I can learn from so many different sources, and I love that. And I love that you mentioned Woo Strength Finder within this
Yeah,
context because they may not be correlated, but that doesn't mean that they can't be. Because when it comes to words and how we define things and how we explain things, it's so much more subjective than we've ever been allowed to believe before. And it's a courageous act to allow ourselves to redefine what a word means for us.
right.
And it's also an opportunity to stand in our authenticity.
Love it.
Another part of the whole courage conversation that I wanted to mention, you guys have said it a couple times in passing, and so I wanted to bring it back and make sure that it got mentioned, is I feel like you can learn to grow into your courageous, authentic self. And one of the ways I think that it's important to do that is to learn to build your support system and find the right people, find your support system, whether that's friends or spouses or however that happens for each of us. And then I think that support system and those people that are there for you gives you that extra courageous boost, that support that you
Right.
need to then grow into your most courageous, authentic self and bring that to the world. I know that's really true for me. Mary, you mentioned this earlier, but Steve and I just moved across the world to live in a new
Right.
place. But it was because I had this sort of rock with me, right? Like Steve is this incredible amount of support, and all my other friends and others who supported me in all those ways and taught me that I could do things I didn't think I could do. But when I think about that, I think, okay, I built this sort of system of support and believing in
Right.
myself and having people believing in me. And that allowed, I think that allows each of us to do things that the world sees as brave. Tiffany, the same thing, like you built yourself and your support system and your belief in yourself to the point that you could make that leap when you made that
Yes.
big move as well. We've all been in those situations. Mary, you've had them many times in your life too. And there was a reason that you were able to do that.
Well,
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, I think one thing that's really important that helped me to cultivate that kind of courageousness within me rather than only external, because a community is important, but it can only help us to to the point where we have developed it within ourselves as well. So we have to have strength in our own foundation in order to feel the strength around us. I've noticed it's within my work, but also in my own personal experience. And so a lot of individuals have a community or a family or people that surround them who want to naysay or and it's not necessarily from a negative place. It's not necessarily from a I want to tear you down place. A lot of times when someone is not supportive of your ideas or your visions, one, it's because they can't see your vision, they can't see where you're going. Two, it's because a lot of times that's fear that is coming through their voice is how they would feel if they were in your shoes, but they're not in your shoes. So a lot of times it actually is easier initially to step outside of your community and tell a perfect stranger what your wildest dreams are and allow that perfect stranger to support you and to boost you up, because why not?
right.
And until you cultivate that within yourself and learn to adjust your circle, sometimes going outside of your circle can be the bravest thing you can do for yourself.
Yeah, I love that.
I love that too. That's really
Tim,
powerful. And it's interesting you say that because I remember a time in my life when I did that very thing. And somewhere along the way, the system was put in place where I could do that, where I was able to tell people I didn't know sort of my deepest, darkest desire for my life and put it out there. And that is incredibly empowering.
Yeah,
That's wonderful.
it
Your
absolutely can be.
your story, Tim, about like Steve being this incredible, like to me, he's like a towering oak for sure. I mean, just in a lot of ways, but I think he's also a blossom. But um, so Noel always says that together we're rock stars. He's the rock and I'm the star.
Mhm.
Love
And
that. Same exact principle. Yes.
and it's
The two of
so
you
true.
together can do anything. And this is what I
Right.
always feel like. I feel like I can do anything if he's there with me. And you are that way with Noel. And it doesn't even have to be a spouse. It can be a friend, a loved one, a family member. I think it's really wonderful if you have that in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know that if you don't have that yet, you can cultivate that. You can bring that in. Our circle is our circle, but it's not unchangeable. We can swap in pieces to what help us feel like we're in our most aligned self. That's so important to know that we have that free will, we have that freedom to do that. Um, when one of the scariest things that I ever did was start to vocalize about my experience with child sexual abuse. I was so afraid. I was in my late 20s. I was so afraid to tell anyone because I already had a built-in expectation that they were going to tell me, you're just making that up. You just want attention. All of the negative things that go through our mind. No one's going to believe you. Why would you say that now?
It's your
Let
fault.
sleeping dogs lie. Exactly. So many of those negative things that we tell ourselves in our head or that we've been told in the past and continue to repeat it in our head. So one of the bravest things that I ever did was the first time I ever vocalized it out loud was to someone I barely knew. It was someone that I had been dating for like maybe a matter of weeks. I barely knew him, and I told him this is something that keeps coming up for the last several years. I think it took me like 6 or 7 years to really start to even think that I could talk about it. And I vocalized it to essentially almost a perfect stranger. And his response, because it was easier if he responded negatively, no big deal. I barely know him. He doesn't have to be in my life, and I don't have to tell anyone that's close to me. I don't have to tell my circle. But the way he responded of just being so supportive of like, I believe you. It's not my place not to believe you. It's not my place to tear you down or to say otherwise. This is your experience. This is your truth.
Right.
That one encounter of being brave enough to tell a perfect stranger something that was scary to me and allowing them to like just reflect back to me that it's okay to talk about this changed my entire trajectory. And so if you feel in you that your circle is not going to be supportive of something you need support in until you have support within yourself, then tell a stranger. There are so many forums, both in community but also online, where you can just share and say, hey, I need a little support with this. Ask for support. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to ask for what you need. And the more that you do that and you see that return to you, the more you'll realize that you don't have to be a goose within a duckling family.
It's great
I don't know if
stuff.
anyone
Thank you.
remembers this.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that,
Yeah.
Tiffany. And again, what I want is, I want to encourage everybody to like recognize your own bravery and the times that it's happened to you and how that felt, and continue to work toward being more courageous and authentic in ways that you feel like you can do safely in your own life. I think anytime that we each have experienced it, it's incredibly empowering and builds our self-esteem and keeps reminding us what you can do. We're all capable of so much more than we really think, or that the world maybe tells us that we should
Right.
or could. So I love that. I want to start wrapping this up. So I'm going to ask each of you to sort of say any final thoughts that you have around this, maybe some point you want to remake, or general thoughts about the conversation. I appreciate you both being honest and vulnerable in this conversation and being willing to have this conversation. I want to thank Alice McKenzie Swain for this wonderful quote
Right.
from her poetry that was so inspiring to us. And I'm sure we could sit here and talk about this on and on, but I encourage everybody, have your own conversations, find a safe place, the right people, and have this kind of conversation yourself and see what everybody thinks. It's wonderful. Mary, what would you like to say sort of in closing, wrapping up the conversation?
In closing, I would like to, first of all, this was such a great conversation. Tiffany, I always have learned something from you, and I appreciate learning something from you for sure every time. So much appreciated for that. I also am referring to a very favorite text of mine from Marianne Williamson, who says, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be?"
Yeah, such a wonderful quote. And thank you for bringing that. It's totally appropriate and wonderful to bring that in at this point. Tiffany, final thoughts from you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mary. That was a beautiful quote. It's actually one of my favorites as well. And I have really enjoyed the discussions that we've been cultivating here and learning from everyone involved. One thing that I will add is when it comes to courage, when it comes to bravery, look at the people that you find most courageous. Look at the people where you see as being brave or courageous, and what is it about them that makes you think that they're courageous? Because when it comes to shadow work, everyone is a mirror for us. So what we see in others, what we admire and love, or what we admire in others is often what we admire in ourselves and we just haven't recognized. And what we crave that others have is something that we can cultivate within ourselves. So when you look at other people of who you think that they're brave or courageous, why? What is it about them that you find courageous? And can you then see the mirror of that in yourself? This is an opportunity for that. Are there other people around you who see courageousness in you? Because even one little drop of courage within you can spread to seed a wildflower meadow of courageousness in other areas of your life. And I think that's what I would add is the courage you see in others is the courage you can and likely do have in yourself.
I love that sentiment. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Mary and Tiffany, thank you both so much for taking time to have this conversation. Thank you for listening. And if you've enjoyed this and found it helpful, please share it with somebody that you think would also benefit from it or enjoy it. Tiffany and Mary, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Great to see you again.